The Disenchantments by Nina LaCour. This is the end of our Nina LaCour back catalog journey. I've read all of her books now, except for some of the children's books. Those don't count. I'm more interested in the novels. I'm really glad that I saved this one for last, and by saved this one for last, I mean this flew under my radar and I barely knew it existed. But I'm still glad that I read it last because it's actually a good book. I don't like all of Nina LaCour's books. Some of them are good, some of them are pretty bad. I really liked ending on a good note here. So I think the reason this flew under my radar is because it is one of her least gay books. I would actually argue that it is maybe gayer than Watch Over Me. The main character in that book is implied to be bisexual, but there's like no romance storyline, and it doesn't really go there. So it's kind of fuzzy as to whether or not it's even gay. But in this book, the main character, the only point of view character, is actually a man. That's a first for Nina LaCour, except for her book You Know Me Well, which has two point of views. One's a man, one's a woman. And also that book has two authors, and I'm going to assume that Nina LaCour wrote the female point of view, and David Levithan, the male author, wrote the male point of view in that, I'm assuming. So this is Nina LaCour's only novel with a male protagonist. And I liked it, and it's not that gay, and I liked it, and this might be my favorite Nina LaCour book. I think Hold Still is technically a better book, but I think the premise and the content and the story of this book was maybe more interesting to me than Hold Still. I actually really liked Hold Still. I gave that 5 stars. I did relate to that. It's a little coming of age story about grief in high school, and I actually think that book's really well done. But I think this book is even more interesting, and there's just more going on, and I think these characters are a little bit more vibrant and varied and complex even though I think in that book the character complexities work. They do not always work in all Nina LaCour books. I actually had a feeling going in that this might be good, because this was Nina LaCour's second book. Her first book, Hold Still, was good, and I think some of her earlier books are better than her later books. I think she has gotten worse and worse as a writer over time. There's some slight variance. It's not a clear, perfect downhill slope, but it's like mostly downhill. It gets bad. Her more recent books are bad. If you want to read Nina LaCour, I recommend starting at the start of her catalog, and as soon as the quality dips too low for you, just get out of there. It's not improving from that point on. I don't know why that is. I'm going to talk about that more, I think, at the end of this video. But for now, I'm going to get into the plot summary. I'll do a really brief plot summary here. So our main character, Colby, 18-year-old boy, he just graduated high school. He is best friends with this girl named Bev, also an 18-year-old girl, also just graduated high school. They go to this arts high school. They've been best friends for years, but Colby is in love with her secretly. I mean, she knows it's not really a secret, but like he hasn't told her. They haven't talked about it. They don't have a romantic relationship, but there's clearly chemistry and you know, a connection between them. But they are planning to have a great summer. They have just graduated, and Bev is in a band. She's in a Riot Girl-esque punk band with these two other girls. They have gay dads, if that's some gay representation. The only other gay representation in this is Bev, who is apparently bisexual. I'm assuming her sexuality is not really talked about here, but we do see her flirt with both men and women in this. So I guess she's bisexual, but that doesn't get brought up a lot, and it's not a major factor of the story. So again, this is not a super queer novel, especially by Nina LaCour standards. Bev's in a band, but they are going to go on a mini tour on the West Coast from San Francisco to Portland. The 3 girls and Colby, who just like owns the van, and he's like their stage manager. He unloads the gear. He's a roadie. And he's also friends with girls, and they're just gonna have a fun summer, and then after that, Colby, and Bev are going to go to Europe and gallivant around Europe. They have these lofty ideals. They've been planning this trip for 4 years, and then right at the start of their summer tour, Bev tells him that she's not going to Europe with him she's gonna go to art school in Rhode Island. And so Colby's world comes crashing down. He's very hurt. His life is in shambles. All of his plans for the future are just defunct. He'd sort of planned everything around this girl, and he's very hurt by this, and he really wants to know why she's changed her mind. And it's really an emotional journey between these characters and like this friend group, but mostly the two love interests here. And it's a really nice, deep, emotional coming of age story about these two humans at this very transitory phase of their lives who are doing different things and growing apart from each other, but also growing closer to each other. And they're on this journey, the self-discovery journey. Again, they're on their own. They're road tripping along the coast on their own for the first time. They're doing all these new things, meeting all these new people, in this very, I don't know, festering environment. There's all this new creativity and new experiences, and they're learning about themselves. And it's a very emotionally aware, emotionally heightened sort of novel, which is like a Nina LaCour style, but in this book it actually works. What a concept. I've decided that Nina LaCour books live and die by the premise. I talked about this in my other videos, if you've seen those. If not, I'll summarize. Nina LaCour writes a lot about grief and like sadness. There's not really grief in this, but they're like sad. A lot of these kids, I guess they're adults, they're 18, but a lot of these kids, they're going through things like divorce, family problems, breakups, first loves. So, you know, there's a lot of heightened emotion here and sadness here. Hold Still, the other book I liked, same thing. That is a girl dealing with grief. Her best friend is dead, and it's a journey of her going back to school for a new school year without her best friend, and everyone treats her differently, and it's very shaken up her world, and everything's very different, and she sees everything in this new light, and she has to completely readjust her life. So that's also a coming of age story. But that works because she's going to school and doing all these things, and there's new teachers and new kids at the school, and you know, life goes on around her sadness, and she learns to incorporate her sadness and her past selves and her future selves, and incorporate all of these new things and these new areas of her life into her life and the broader scheme of her life. And she learns to, you know, make everything work and how to be human. And that's another major theme of this, is coming into adulthood, learning what you want to do with yourself and with your life and who you want to be and what you want to do for a living. And this book also works because there's a lot going on. They're always doing things, they're moving, they're meeting new people, there's other things happening outside of Colby's sadness. And Colby has these moments of reflection where he gets these small moments to be alone, and then he can think about how sad he is and how weird it is, how things are different between him and Bev, and how his life has come crashing down, and like he doesn't know what he's gonna do. But those moments of sadness work because they are offset by moments of happiness and action and things going on. So those moments of sadness actually hold significance because you have something to compare them to. Compared to a book like We Are Okay, which is about a college student dealing with grief, where literally nothing happens. That book's not very good. It is a college student alone in her dorm on winter break. She has like no friends. She has one friend in the book, but like nothing is happening around her. There are no other characters to follow. There are no subplots. It is just her in her head being like, I'm sad, I'm sad, I'm sad. Oh, here's a flashback that I'm also sad in the flashback, by the way. And then I'm sad, I'm sad, I'm sad. And it's just very monotonous. And the sadness and the grief and the impact of that does not work because it is the same tone all throughout, and it is boring, and it just doesn't work. You just don't feel the sadness because there's absolutely nothing to offset it. And that's because of the premise. There's nothing going on. There's like no one at this school with her. There's just nothing happening. That's just the plot setup that she came up with for that book. Immediately doomed that book. Because you have to have something else going on. And this book does that very well. The Disenchantments does that well. And again, this book and Hold Still came before We Are Okay. So I don't know how or why Nina LaCour forgot how to write a novel. But that's what she did. Similarly, even after We Are Okay, she wrote Watch Over Me, which is also like one character in one setting. There's other side characters, but like they're all in one setting and nothing happens, and it just doesn't work because it's the same tone throughout the entire story. You have no driving force. It's just a sad girl being sad. And this book isn't just a sad boy being sad, thank God, or it would have been bad, right? You need the life happening around the sadness to give any weight to the sadness. And I think this book does that really well. I also like this book, maybe so much because it reminds me of my favorite book of all time, Hard Love by Ellen Whitlinger. This is a very similar kind of story. Male point of view, teenage boy. In this book, he befriends and then falls for a lesbian who obviously does not reciprocate his feelings, and he has to come to the terms with the fact that love is hard and things don't always work out. This isn't a cliche love story. The Disenchantments isn't either. I think that really works. I really like this ending. I sort of like where a lot of these characters go. I like that it gets into really authentic, messy emotions. This isn't like just a cliche romance arc. It's not really a love story. It's a self-discovery journey. These people make realistic decisions at the end of this book and do realistic things, and it's a happy ending in that they're learning more about themselves, but it's not like a happy romance ending where they're gonna be together forever. But you still get that bond between these characters, and it talks a lot about potential in the future, and you never know where someone will end up or how you've impacted someone or how you've changed someone's life. And so you can imagine these characters in the future meeting again and bonding again and falling in love potentially. But I really liked the authenticity of that, and I think that was very reminiscent of the relationship in this book, which is about friendship and teenage emotions and like first loves and how you over prioritize your first love, and it's sort of heightened and over dramatized, but not in a way that feels dramatic to you as the reader. It feels like very authentic. It feels like very authentic emotions, but you sort of know like, oh, you guys are kids, you have your whole life ahead of you. Of course, it's not exactly similar to this. Again, this is about a lesbian, and it says she's a lesbian, and it talks about sexuality, and they obviously don't end up together at all. But the Disenchantments handles a lot of the same ideas of love being hard and rejection, and I really like the way it was done, and I just really personally enjoyed that story. I guess probably because I'm so attached to this. Part of the reason I love this book so much is some nostalgia. This was like the first queer book I ever read. This was the only queer YA my school library had, for the most part, with like an explicitly lesbian character. I would have really liked reading The Disenchantments when I was in high school or middle school. It wasn't out yet. When did this come out? 2012? Actually, it did come out when I was in high school. But this came out in the 90s. So I still would have preferred Hard Love at the time, but I think I really would have liked this in high school. Which I said the same thing about Hold Still, which actually, again, is not her gayest book. It features a straight girl is the main character, and then there's a lesbian side character who's in a very healthy queer lesbian relationship, and the queer relationships of that are explicitly stated and are seen in this very positive light. I would have loved that in high school. I would have loved this. Which brings me to, why has her writing gotten worse as it's gotten gayer? Because I'm pretty sure Nina LaCour is queer. I don't really do a lot of research into authors. I don't know anything about this author. I don't look it up. I've just read all of her books, and if she's not gay, she writes a lot of books about lesbians for a straight woman. So I'm going to assume that Nina LaCour is queer. I'm 99% sure. And I'm also going to make the assumption, again, I'm presuming here, this is a theory that makes sense in my mind. These first two books of hers, not super queer sort of side characters, or the queerness is just a minor thing that's sort of mentioned, but not a broader theme of the novel. And our first book came out in 2009. I'm going to guess that in 2009, it was easier to sell a book with queer side characters rather than queer main characters. I'm going to guess that she always wanted to write books about queer people, which is why there are queer people in all of these early books. I just broke my pencil. I didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to assume she always wanted to write about queer characters, but had trouble with it at first, or was afraid to do it at first, or just found it easier to get into the industry with a straighter book, and then once she's established herself as an author, earned the trust of readers and publishers, whoever, then she was able to write the stories that she actually wanted to write, which were centered around queer women. And you'd think that having more passion for the subject and finally getting to write the characters you wanted to write, that those books would be better. They are not. They're not. They just continually get worse. Why? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if maybe she had these early books like more written, you know? I've talked about this before. I don't really want to repeat myself. They say you have your whole life to write your first book, you know, so she was probably working on that for years before she submitted it. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe she churned this out in NaNoWriMo in 1 month. I don't know. But it's possible that she was working on like the first couple of books for a long time before she got accepted to a publisher and to an agent and all of that. And then the later books came after she was already signed, and so she was writing on a deadline, and maybe they're just like rushed and she just doesn't have the time to fully plot them out the way she did those first couple of books, and so the quality is decreased as her output has increased over time. I don't know. I do think there are some things about this book that she has improved on since writing it, though. Again, I said Hold Still was a technically better book. There were a couple things about this book that sort of rubbed me the wrong way. I think that was maybe because it's kind of old. Don't take this as heavy criticism. I just wanted to mention it because I feel like some people reading this, especially nowadays, would have a problem with this. Some people would not enjoy this in a book. But don't take this as heavy criticism. One, the bisexual representation, not explicitly stated, not a huge part of this book. Again, nowadays someone might have a problem with that not being a bigger thing. Maybe it was a product of the times. And then also, Bev is kind of seen as very flirty. Like, she flirts with a lot of people, but it's like she's a tease. You know, she doesn't put out. She just likes to flirt with people and make out with a lot of people at parties, which is kind of like a promiscuous bisexual stereotype. I don't really think that's what Nina LaCour was going for. Again, this is a very sort of minor complaint, if it is, but I feel like someone reading this book would be like, oh, another slightly overly sexualized bi girl, or like, of course the bi girl is flirting with everyone all the time, and she's like, you know, the sluttier one of the group. She's not that slutty. The book doesn't call her slutty, but she is like the one who flirts the most at parties. So like, is that a stereotype? But I haven't seen that in Nina LaCour's later books. I don't think there's like problematic bisexual representation in any of her other books that I can remember reading. There's also in this like a fair amount of casual sexism. I guess that stems from the fact that this is a teenage boy character who would have been, you know, grown up in that society and been around that sort of behavior. There are several men in this who see the girls in the band and are like, oh yeah, hot teenage girls. And they go to Colby and they're like, oh, it's just you and the girls? How did you score that one? And he doesn't really mention anything about this. He's not like, all of these men are gross. He says it one time where he's like, it's kind of gross that this guy's sexualizing my friends, but can you blame him? They are pretty hot. I'm like, he's not like the worst main character. Most of the time he just like doesn't even think about this, but that does feel like a male main character where he's like, oh yeah, dudes just say sexist things, whatever. There is a part where the girls are talking about how female musicians have it harder in the industry because they have to be sexy. Like, men just have to be talented, women have to be talented and beautiful. So like, there's some discussion there that doesn't really go anywhere. There's not like a storyline where Colby's like, oh, I've said or thought some sexist things and maybe I need to work on that. It's not really a big part of the novel. It's just these couple little moments where they like, you notice it. It stands out. I don't think Nina LaCour is sexist. I'm not like dragging Nina LaCour. And in her other books, there's nothing like this. So I think she either learned that she didn't want to do that, or I don't know. Her other books are not like this. I don't think Nina LaCour is sexist. If she hasn't written anything like this in the last 13 years, I'm going to assume this was a one-off little mistake, if you want to call it a mistake. I mean, it's not good that the characters are portrayed that way or talked about that way, and they're never, like, those men aren't, like, told off ever. That was a little weird, but I mean, he's a teenage boy. He's not that bad. He does overhear them talk a little bit about sexism, so I'm going to assume that he grows as a person. I don't think Nina LaCour is advocating that type of behavior, but it's there. That might bother someone reading this now. Maybe that was less of a thing to be concerned about in 2012. I mean, it was a thing to be concerned about, but maybe people weren't as often concerned about it as they have been. There was also a scene that I just didn't like. Here's my prejudice, but not really, because it's stupid. I think this is the third Nina LaCour book I've read where a teenager talks a bartender into serving them alcohol. No, it still wouldn't happen. It wasn't realistic in those other books, and it wasn't realistic in this one. Colby goes to the bartender. He was watching the girl he likes make out with another girl on the dance floor, and he goes to the bartender and he's like, man, I've had a bad night. I need a drink, just one drink. And the bartender's like, no, you're a kid. And he's like, no, man, you don't get it. My girl doesn't love me. The bartender's like, oh, okay, I feel real bad for you, kid, so I'll give you a drink so that you can drown your sorrows. Because the best way to show empathy to a child experiencing heartbreak is to show them that alcohol is a release for their sorrows and that they should drink when they're sad. That's a great message to send to a teenager. It's not, and I guess a bartender would do that because they're just fine with serving alcohol. I don't drink. I'm very anti-alcohol. I've talked about this before. I can't get into it again. We'll be here for an hour. But no, I don't know why everyone in these Nina LaCour books, like, just goes to, like, legitimate restaurants and, like, establishments and convinces people to serve them alcohol. It just wouldn't happen, because it's not worth losing your job and breaking the law to give alcohol to a child, and no one would do that. It's just not realistic, and I don't know why that's in every Nina LaCour book. Not even, like, with a fake ID, just, like, begging the bartender, I'm underage, but I'm sad. No, stop it. Those are the only things that knocked the rating down of this book for me. I gave Hold Still 5 stars. I think I'll give this one, like, a 4.5. Because I did really like it, and I think it's deeper than your average YA. I think the storyline of about love and about relationships and how relationships change and dynamics change and people change, and about how you grow with them or grow apart or grow separately but are still appreciative of each other. I think that's just really well done here, and I really liked this book. Actually, I really enjoyed it. I think I got a lot out of this. I think I'll remember this one. This actually touched me in some way. Again, I think this is the Nina LaCour novel that spoke to me the most out of any of them. You wouldn't expect the one about the straight man to be the one that I liked best here at Mostly Sapphic Books, but apparently that's what happened. But it was a good book. I enjoyed it. It was a good note to end my Nina LaCour series on. It is finished for the foreseeable future, unless she publishes more books in the future, which she might. They might be terrible. I mean, she's already down to, like, 1-star books. Her last novel was Yerba Buena, which was her worst book. So, like, I don't know how much lower she can go. It would be impressive, though. If she can write a book worse than Yerba Buena, I will commend her for doing something incredible and impossible. Maybe just bring back the sexism. That'll do it. Don't do that. Please don't do that, Nina LaCour. She's not gonna do that. She's not gonna do that. Her books aren't problematic. They're just poorly structured sometimes. And again, she shoots herself in the foot with a poor premise that just doesn't allow these characters or their emotions to shine sometimes. But she can do it right. This book proves that she can do those things right. And she is a good writer. And she can do it. But does she always do it? No. but she can't. And maybe she tries. And sometimes it just doesn't hit the mark. But I do appreciate the attempt. I admire that. Thank you for watching. If you watched this whole series, good on you. If you've read Nina LaCour, let me know what your favorite book is. Let me know if you like Yerba Buena. Some people really like Yerba Buena. I was reading like good reviews for that book. I don't know what the hell you guys were reading, but to each their own. You're allowed to have bad opinions. But yeah, that's it. We're done. For realsies this time. I said that last time, and then I learned that this book existed. But I finished it, and I'm glad I did. It was a good read. So I'll see you in the next video. Or not. Like and subscribe. Or not. I won't know. Oh, I also wanted to mention that I think this book had like a budget, because they used a lot of musical quotes. They quoted the Supremes, Slater Kinney, which is pretty gay. That's pretty gay. That was maybe the gayest part of this book, aside from Bev making out with that one girl one time and mentioning that she'd made out with a couple other girls. But the amount of Slater Kinney in this was pretty gay. That's something. That's some authentic queerness right there. It's the bi girl who doesn't say she's bi, but she listens to a lot of Riot Girl for, you know, just the straight girl that likes to make out with other girls at parties. Nah, she's pretty gay.